Doot, doot, doot. Good morning, comrades. You're listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning, Comrade. Today on the show, we have a very special guest. We have Daniel Dominguez. Daniel, what's going on?
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me here. And just to let people know who I am, I'm a socialist. I'm a member of the Democratic Socialists of America in Los Angeles. I'm also I'm an organizer in the healthcare industry, and I also serve on what we call the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission inside of our organization. So that's the national body that really guides DSA's labor organizing and our orientation towards the broader labor movement.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about a couple of things, specifically about the DSLC, about the DSA strategy towards labor, sort of generally, and then on a couple of specific issues. So I guess to kind of kick us off, can you just describe what the DSLC is and sort of what is the general sort of approach that DSA takes towards labor? What are some of the things it's working with?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the story here starts 2017 at our national convention. I was not yet a member, but I've been able to fill in the details through comrades who were around at the time. So the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission did not exist prior to 2017. It was a mandate through one of the resolutions that passed. And I think that was with a growing DSA that recognized that we needed to do labor organizing at some level. We needed to have a group of people tasked with guiding that work for DSA. So it's been about 3 years, or almost 4 years since that passed. I've been serving on the steering committee for the last year and a half. So I'm almost at the end of my term. So it's a 12-person steering committee, and we represent different regions within DSA. So, for example, I represent the Western region, which is really just like California and Hawaii. But we have comrades who represent the Pacific Northwest, the South, the Northeast, Midwest, and Mountain regions. So it's really to be representative of the diversity across our organization. And also important to note that our steering committee is it's in order to get on the steering committee, you basically either have to be a rank and file union member, or you can also be a staff organizer for a union. And there's a few other requirements that you can meet in order to serve. But so yeah, it's basically 12 people from across the country who were embedded in the labor movement and are dedicated to making sure that DSA has a labor organizing strategy. Now, I can get into it if you want, but basically at the moment, there's competing strategies within DSA about what our labor strategy should be.
Yeah, get into it. I mean, like, just tell a couple of different sort of broad strokes of what are some of the ideas around strategy, and then we can get into some of the campaigns that the DSLC is working on.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think that I would divide the debate or the discussion on our strategy into sort of two camps. One of them has gained, or it was popular, I think, when I came into DSA. I remember hearing about it at the time, so people know it. May know it by the rank and file strategy. I think there's various different iterations of it. A lot of this is based on Kim Moody's writings, as far as I know. But in DSA, it takes a bit of a different shape. There's an emphasis on rank and file activity, and in particular, industrializing into key sectors. Some of them being teaching, nursing, and then the logistics sector. So that's in a nutshell. That is one strategy that is advocated for within DSA. Now,
the focus of a lot of the very early work of the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. So in 2019, we the membership passed a few different labor resolutions that were supposed to inform our work. Now, there wasn't really a way to prioritize them, and so in the DSLC, it's been our job to sort of translate that into translate the membership, the will of the membership into actual work. So, but before I get into that, I wanted to also offer the competing labor strategy, which can, I would sum it up as, organizing where you're at, encouraging all of our DSA members to engage in workplace organizing, whether you're working towards an eventual union in the workplace, whether you're just organizing to win worker protections. We know that some, if you work in a coffee shop, it may be hard to unionize for several reasons. One of them being that it's hard. There's high turnover in that industry. There's just fragmentation, so it makes it hard to build power if you work like at a mom and pop coffee shop, right? Doesn't mean you can't organize. And organize for better protections. We saw in the pandemic that a lot of these types of shops were organizing for things like PPE, hazard pay, just basic like baseline protections. And again, you can organize without being in a union. So I'm particularly I subscribe to that organizing strategy. I think we need to be as DSA, as socialists on the left. We need to be doing as much as we can to encourage everyone to organize. It is everyone works, right? Everyone in DSA works. You're a worker.
If you're in the working class, you work.
Exactly. It's as simple as that, right? So you should be engaging in some level of class struggle on the shop floor. And the reason I'm not particularly fond of the rank and file strategy is just historically, it hasn't worked out. Right. I think we hear a lot of our comrades who advocate for it as something worth doing. A lot of people in the 60s, 70s, 80s industrialized into key sectors like warehouse jobs. And while they were super militant, and I'm sure they were able to identify other leaders and build up their sort of shop floor organizing, it just did not translate into broad scale victories for the working class or for the union movement. So there basically comes down to there's competing strategies in DSA, and we have to learn how to balance that because that's what the membership voted for. We voted for rank and file strategy, and we also voted for organizing the unorganized. So
and they're not like directly contradictory strategies. There's differences in emphasis here, but there's certain like parts of these. I mean, there's obviously two very different approaches, but they can potentially coexist at least at some level. Now, in terms of defining what going all in on one or the other, I don't know if we've even like DSA would even have the ability to do that at this point. But I mean, it's something that, especially considering that there is such a, this is being something that's being worked out like in real time. It's hard to like totally commit to one or the other. So I guess just to move on a little bit to some of the campaigns that is going forward, I've been talking a lot on the show about specifically the PRO Act. And right now DSA has a pretty large-scale campaign to get the PRO Act passed. Can you just talk a little bit about the PRO Act, and then we can get into what the specifics of the DSA kind of strategy is?
Yeah. I'll give a high-level overview of the PRO Act. It is basically it's an overhaul of the existing labor law regime, which is the National Labor Relations Act, which has been amended several times, and just over the
Not
decades.
Always for the better either.
Yeah, hardly ever for the better is the problem here. So just in the last century, it's been amended several times, and like you said, usually not in our favor. So what that means is that there's just a lot of structural barriers to organizing a union, right? We're not talking about regular employment law. We're talking about the law when workers want a union and when they're organizing for a union. So there's, I'll give you an example of what it looks like. So currently, the National Labor Relations Act doesn't really have penalties for employers who violate the law. If they're cited enough times as having engaged in unlawful labor practices, what they're asked to do is put up a notice in their break room, right, and letting their employees know that they violated the law. And that's kind of it. It's a little bit toothless,
Oops,
right? I mean,
oops,
I'm sure.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'm sure it has an effect, just not a significant enough effect so that workers can, overcome their fear and hopelessness around organizing a union. So, as a healthcare organizer or an organizer in the healthcare industry, I work on a lot of external organizing. So when we get an inquiry from a worker in a hospital or a community clinic or a nursing home, I follow up with them and really guide them to in their way to form a union.
Mhm.
And what I often see, what I've seen in my experience, is that workers are scared, right? They're scared. They're scared, and they don't feel a lot of hope. They have not seen a lot of victories in the labor movement. That it's not like they know many people in unions, because union density is at an all-time low. It's hovering around 11%, I think. For
Yeah.
it's even worse in the
Lower
private sector.
Yeah, just it's ridiculously low. It's like 6% or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I see it on a daily basis. It's really, and it's a very real fear that it's not it's not unfounded. So it's tough. I have to, my job as an organizer is to give them enough hope that they can move forward and hope that they'll see a path to victory. And I think a lot of workers just don't see that. Um, I would encourage folks to read up on the PRO Act, because it does amend the law in significant ways. But just to give again, just to give that high level overview, it would implement real penalties for employers who violate the law. One of the things that we often see in new organizing campaigns is workers win the union, and then the boss just drags out the negotiations, and eventually, with enough time, the workers who initially formed the union leave out of desperation and just loss of hope, and they never get their first contract. So one of the things that the PRO Act would change is, after a year's time, it would force it into mediation, right? And it would be compulsory, so the employer would be forced to sit down and negotiate.
It's just forcing the boss to negotiate in good faith,
Right.
because the contract's coming, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. It would also, do away with right to work laws in a lot of the states. I think currently 27 states have right to work laws. Would do away with that. That would go a long way towards our goal, I think, as socialists, to organize the South, right? A historically hostile environment for worker organizing.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Yeah, I'm sure you know that intimately. It's
I'm just messing with you.
So, but yeah, I would encourage people to read up on it, because it is, it does a lot to amend the National Labor Relations
Yeah,
Act.
I can actually direct you to our catalog as well, on our back episode with Ryan Kekaris. Look that one up. We went into the PRO Act pretty deeply. Yeah, it does so many great things. It outlaws replacement workers, scabs. It has protections for workers being misclassified, which is a huge deal with these Prop 22s happening in California. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with that one more than I am. But there's also problems with misclassification of migrant workers who might not have protected status in the U.S. Just so many different things that this PRO Act does, which is like not going to solve the labor problem. This is not like a bill to like overthrow the ruling class and implement workers' rule. It's not exactly that, but it's a baby step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's definitely a baby step. Exactly.
Yeah, you are listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. We have Daniel Dominguez from the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission. He's also a union organizer on the program. So we're talking a little bit about PRO Act right now. And we were just kind of did a little quick overview of it. And I wanted to kind of ask you about what's sort of the broad strategy for DSA in this PRO Act campaign. I know we're working with a lot of unions, and I was just on a call, and Mindy was sort of like our friend Mindy was whipping people to phone bank, so which she's very good at, by the way. So what are some ways that people could get plugged in to support that? What is DSA doing first, and then how can people get involved?
Yeah, so this is, I've been in DSA for a little over 2 years now, and I have to say this is a one-of-a-kind campaign that I've seen so far. So, the PRO Act campaign is, the PRO Act itself is something that has been kicked around as legislation for the past 2 years. And I think the reason we saw real movement is that there's a Democrat in the White House, and the Democrats control both houses of the legislature. Right, not exactly a perfect recipe for overhauling our labor law, but in just his first few months in office, Joe Biden has signaled that he's willing to listen to the labor movement. He, on day one, he fired Peter Robb, the legal counsel for the National Labor Relations Board. He had the power to make
one of the great heels of the labor movement. He tried to kill Scabby.
yeah, it's like what? So
well, you're trying to destroy an icon, buddy. That's not going to work. Scabby's going to beat you.
So on day one, he fired this guy, right? Which was, I think, it's a sign that he's listening. Nowhere near enough, obviously, but it's a good sign. In addition to that, and I'm sure Ryan Kecker has talked at length about this, is the painters union has really been leading the charge for the past couple of months, slowly building support from the labor movement. And I think as DSA, as socialists who want to see, who believe that we need a fighting labor movement to see the changes we want. It was a brainer, right? We want, we see a path to victory, and we want to work on this campaign. So, as a member of the steering committee for the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission, I am part of the campaign steering committee as well. So it's actually a joint campaign that's being led by the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission and the Green New Deal campaign committee. So two very important bodies in our organization. So it's been about 2 months since we adopted the campaign, and since then we've just seen like tremendous energy behind it. And luckily, we have just the talent of so many experienced organizers who are able to build out this campaign with a real power analysis, like who are we targeting, why are we targeting them, what are our tactics, how are we using this to mobilize our membership, how are we using this to recruit new members, especially people from the labor movement. So just to give you an idea of what the campaign looks like in its first few days, we had a big launch call in March. We had Sarah Nelson, Jamal Bowman, and Naomi Klein, as well as several comrades from DSA. And so it was just tremendous. We had nearly 1,500 people on the call, which is probably the first time we've had that many people on a national call. And so we've just been building off of that ever since. And this week, we're March 22nd now, we are basically having a week of action. A week of action is to have as many people call voters in key states. Let me explain what I mean by key states. So currently, there's 5 senators there's 5 senators who have not signaled any support for the PRO Act.
There's 5 Democrats.
Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Yeah.
You broke up a little bit.
Thank you.
It's okay. You broke up a little bit. Hold on. You there? All right, cool. Yeah. So you were just saying that there were 5 Democratic senators who have not shown support for the PRO Act. Can you go ahead and name them?
Yeah. My pleasure. We got Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly from Arizona, Mark Warner from Virginia, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, and Angus King from Maine. So we're calling voters in those states and encouraging them to call their senators, because they're their constituents, and really putting pressure on them to vote yes on the PRO Act. So that's just this week, and I want to be frank about something, and I think most people know this, right? This probably is not going to pass the Senate without some degree of filibuster reform. And filibuster reform it's just been the ire of progressives and socialists, for time immemorial. That it is just again a relic of the Jim Crow era. It doesn't serve any purpose other than to block good legislation that would allow us to build a true workers' movement. So, I think people recognize that. The IUPAT DSA recognizes that, and we're incorporating that into our analysis. But luckily, we've seen some movement in the past couple of weeks. It's a little bit zigzaggy, but that filibuster reform is in the realm of possibility. So that's this week of action. Then we're also, as part of the campaign, we are trying to mobilize as many DSA chapters and members and unionists and people as possible. Like this will not get done. This will not get through the Senate without a mass mobilization of people, right? Like we saw during the New Deal era, and that's based in a strong labor movement. So that's part of our campaign as well. We're making sure that every chapter has a campaign going, If they need help, we're going to have like experienced organizers on hand to give them the coaching they need to get their campaign up and running. We're doing trainings on how to run a campaign. We're giving trainings on so that union members know how to talk to their fellow union members about why they need to be involved in this campaign. So it's relational organizing. Exactly.
Which was something that was pretty big during the Sanders campaign. I was a part of some of that stuff. That was really, I mean, fairly simple, honestly, but it's just maintaining and managing, networks of, who talks to who at your workplace, simple like that, mapping that out. And how do you talk to them? What do they respond to?
Yeah. I think most people are not well versed in that. It should come natural to us. And I don't think people have flexed that muscle a lot, right? But I think DSA is unique in that some people are getting a little bit more experience in doing so. But we need more people doing that, right? Asking your coworker, join me in this phone bank, come help me plan this day of action. We need all of that. We need all hands on deck for this. So that's part of the campaign. And just to sort of flesh out the rest of the timeline, April is going to be another point of emphasis. We want as many chapters as possible to be having a day of action, right? And that can look a few different ways, right? It could be calling your senators, pressuring your senators in some way to get on board with filibuster reform. If you're in a key state, show up to those senators' houses if you can. Whatever it takes to put the heat on them and get them to see that they need to respond to us, and that there's a mass number of people behind this. And then lastly, the May Day, International Workers' Day. We want people out in the streets, and it can't just be DSA. It's going to have to be unions, community groups, everyone out in full force on those days. Now, I say out in full force, but it's going to be up to individual locales to decide whether they're going to be doing something virtual or in person. I think the COVID numbers are trending in a positive direction, and vaccination rates are too. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but hopefully by May Day we'll have people able to go out safely and participate in May Day actions.
Yeah. Just to kind of as a little bit of an aside, I just looked ahead in the calendar, and it's almost a shame when May Day falls on a Saturday, when it falls on a weekend, So it's like, oh man, we can't at least many people who work, 9 to 5 Monday through Fridays wouldn't have the opportunity to sort of not show up to work for that day or it's a lot harder to raise hell on a weekend during the week.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I ever since joining DSA, right, I hear this sort of refrain that we need to stop planning actions on the weekends because they're just not disruptive enough. You're not disrupting the normal flow of things, and if we just wait for our so I think it cuts both ways. We're probably going to have a lot more people out on May Day this year, but it's not going to be as disruptive as if it was during the week.
Yeah. So in order for people to get involved with the DSA campaign for passing the PRO Act, where can people look to? And we can say this again at the end, but where can people look to find that information? Where would you go to sort of support the PRO Act more generally, and then also plug into the DSA program of it?
Yeah, I would say you can check out the National DSA website. We have a page that's if you go to dsausa.org/PROACT, you'll be redirected to some of our resources. And you can also find different ways to get involved. So that might be signing up for a phone bank. Like I said, this is a week of action for phone banks. You can also plug into the national campaign. You have some skills on how to do communications, you're good at spreadsheets. You are a union member and you know how unions function and how they work and how to mobilize them. Sign up. Right? We want people to sign up because we need to expand our capacity as much as possible. Yeah. And importantly, if you're listening to this and you hear, you like what you agree that we need to pass the PRO Act, those people should go back to their unions or find a way to engage unions and get them to throw down on this fight. Because like I said, the labor movement is largely behind it, but the job of the sort of activist layer of unionists to mobilize those unions and their resources.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And even like there, this might be a little bit more difficult, but if you have any connections with, any of these building trades, specifically like the painters union, you should probably reach out to them and say, hey, how can we support you in this Pro Act campaign? How can we get this passed? What are y'all doing? And you can just sort of show solidarity in that way as well. You are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. We have Daniel Dominguez from the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission. He's also a union organizer on the program. We're talking about the Pro Act. We actually changed gears a little bit. And we've been talking also a lot on this program about the Amazon workers union in Bessemer, Alabama. There's a big union drive out there. I guess, what are you seeing from where you're at? And then we can get into a little bit of like where DSA is more generally on showing some support for the workers out there, because obviously we're in favor of it.
Yeah. This has been, just watching it has been so exciting. Seeing that 6,000 Amazon workers, have a shot at winning a union is just incredible. I think a lot of us are tampering our sort of expectations. And from the beginning, a lot of us had, I think we had, real and valid doubts about whether this was a real a campaign with a real path to victory. I think a couple months in, I think a lot of people are really, really excited. There's been a lot of community support in Birmingham, in Bessemer and Birmingham, surrounding areas. And really, like,
huge in this.
What was that?
Birmingham DSA has been huge in this campaign, and from what I understand.
Yeah. They've been showing up, on a daily basis, letting the workers know that the community supports them. They have their back. And I think that's what's great about DSA. We are there to support workers when they're organizing, and being able to show that support, I think, goes a long way. We actually had a membership call this evening for the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission. We got to hear from someone from the Birmingham chapter who was able to speak to some of what they're doing over there, their solidarity efforts. And the solidarity has been countrywide, global. I know just today I participated in a march here in Los Angeles that was led by the County Labor Federation here in Los Angeles County. It was it was great. It was almost 200 people showed up on a Monday morning to march and rally for these workers. We ended up marching to the law offices of the company being used by Amazon. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but they've hired a rather notorious law firm to go in and bust the union. Right, pretty common tactic we see in unionization campaigns, especially when you're up against an employer like Amazon. They'll hire a law firm or some consulting firm who will come in and, they're well versed in what it takes to convince people to vote against their own interests. They're really good at playing the friend of the workers. They're super, I've heard workers tell me about this. Like, people come in, they're super friendly. They know how to, they're really good talkers. And so they're well versed in this. And so we showed up to the offices here in Los Angeles with the intent to deliver a letter asking them to stop what they're doing. They refused to meet with us. The claim was that they were not in their offices, but we have reason to believe otherwise. All to say that it's just been amazing to see the support across the country.
That kind of thing.
It was great in the morning seeing all these people with their Teamsters jackets, steel workers jackets. It was amazing to see just the union support today. And I started thinking, DSA really needs like a cool jacket that looks like it's a union member jacket. I love those things. They got some right. They just have some random, some sort of old-timey graphics on the back sometimes, but
yeah,
they look so cool.
That's one of the things that I've kind of been critical of DSA over, is that the graphic design's too good. It needs to be a little bit crappier so that it could look more like a union shirt.
Yeah, we got too many hit designers. We got to go a little bit old school. Need to get some cool baseball caps and union jackets.
Yeah, exactly. like the one jacket that I see him selling, I know we're getting a little bit off, is that like really kind of like swank looking satin jacket from like the 70s. And I'm just like, yeah, that looks cool, but it also looks too cool.
Yeah, exactly. so so yeah, it's just been really invigorating to see that there's a revitalized, I think, although still small,
Mhm.
movement for workers' rights. Just the fact that, like I said, there were 200 people out there at 8 o'clock in the morning, ready to march and rally for people across the country. It's inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And, I know we're going to have Blanca on later on this week, but she drove her little, her car, to, from Arkansas to Alabama, and she went knocking on doors, canvassing with workers. It's amazing stuff, just seeing the solidarity coming like directly from me. And Blanca's the best. This is your
Yeah.
moment of appreciation for Blanca for me.
Yeah, she's willing to go anywhere, do whatever it takes to
Mhm.
to really show that solidarity. I remember her going, I think, to South Carolina during the primaries to canvass for Bernie, and she's at it again in Bessemer. So,
She drove up
uh,
to Chicago for the teacher strike up there. When I flew up there, she drove from Arkansas. Incredible.
yeah. So it's yeah.
Oh, cool. And so I know that DSA has been, like, we've recently released a statement of support for the workers as well. So there's a lot going on in terms of yeah, showing support for that program, for that drive. I mean, it would be so meaningful if we can get this, this union to be approved by the workers out there. I mean, the way that I've seen you see articles and you see all these other things about how there's been like hundreds of calls or thousands of calls to unions like retail and wholesale department store workers union, just inquiring, more workers in more locations inquiring about, like, how do we get a union here too? So like it's already kind of gotten that, the energy moving on this particular idea. And I mean, a victory would obviously like be a huge shot in the arm of that.
Yeah, no, I think this goes back to the PRO Act, right? It's not that workers don't want unions, like that they want a
Unions
union.
pull it like 80% or something, like something crazy high. They're super
Yeah,
popular.
yeah, it's I think, yeah, I think that the numbers are like in the 60s, 70s. Like if you had the chance to have a union, like, would you want one? And it's like, yeah, people want one, but we don't see that level of activity because like it's almost like they implicitly know how difficult it is.
Mhm.
Like there's again one of the
You're not
common,
wrong.
and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Like one of the common themes I hear when I talk to a worker is, am I going to get fired?
Yeah.
And it's like, you have to balance that. I have, it's like, legally you cannot be fired, right? Legally you cannot be fired.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So how do you get someone to work through that very real fear of, can I lose my job for organizing? When on paper, the truth, it's like, well, there's laws in place to protect you, but in practice, the ruling usually comes down in the favor of the employer because the burden of proof is so high for a worker to prove that they were fired for organizing. So it's not that workers don't know that they need protection. It's just that the workers movement has just been beaten down. We haven't seen major victories in the past couple of years. I mean, there's some, few and far between though. You hear, sometimes you hear of a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 nurses unionizing. A couple of years ago, you saw the teachers striking, but it's just not enough. It's just not enough. We do not see the large scale victories that would really inspire hope in people. So, again, the PRO Act. We need the PRO Act to really, like, yeah, give it a shot in the arm. The labor movement needs a shot in the arm.
Yeah, the PRO Act fight and the PRO Act fight and the Amazon unions fight are like so deeply connected as well, for that very well. Because like if it does become, if the PRO Act passes, for example, and this union is approved, then they will be guaranteed a contract as well. It's sort of like it all sort of jives together, and it would also be more opportunities for people in other places to organize a union, because a lot of those, bad policies or bad laws will be rolled back. So yeah, it's just it all flow together.
Yeah,
I don't want to be like
like
super big brain about it. You could bring Green New Deal in there, but you go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say, it's, Amazon. The reason Amazon's putting up such a big fight isn't because like having a contract here is going to like really hurt their bottom line.
No,
like having
in fact, it costs them money. They're spending like $10,000 a day on these union busting law firms, like you were talking about. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, yeah, like exactly right. They're willing to spend all this money up front, and it's not not because they don't want to have a contract in this one place. It's because they know if there's a victory here, that will inspire workers in other facilities to also want to unionize. And I think that's their fear here. And they know that if they can crush it here, it's going to be a while before we hear of Amazon workers organizing again.
Yeah, they want to make an example.
Exactly. Exactly. And not to lose the thread too much, but our PRO Act campaign, it's sort of like a longer campaign. It's very much tied to the eco-socialist vision we have in DSA. We know that we're nearing the tipping point where if we don't take the necessary action, we're basically doomed to live on an uninhabitable planet down the road. So there's a recognition there that we will not secure a green future without a strong labor movement now. So it's very much, I hate to use this word because it gets overused, but it's an intersectional campaign, right? Like it's a labor movement campaign. It's an environmental campaign, because without hundreds of thousands, millions of new unionized workers, we won't get to something like what we call a Green New Deal.
Yeah. And I don't know if you were prepared to talk about this. I know I didn't talk to you about it beforehand, but the Green New Deal, I think about that a lot as well. And I guess to sort of start, like with no PRO Act, there will be no Green New Deal. There will be. It seems to me that these things are all tied. Like you were saying earlier, like the freaking filibuster in the Senate, that's a prerequisite to get the PRO Act, and the PRO Act is a prerequisite, from at least in my opinion, to getting the Green New Deal, which is like something that is almost like like it sounds apocalyptic a little bit. It almost sounds a little bit silly that you're talking about it, but like if we don't have a huge scale like reshuffling and reorientation of like how our economy works from from bow to stern, basically, we're basically the damage to the earth is going to be like irreparable to a certain extent. But I wanted to speak specifically about the Green New Deal and their involvement in the PRO Act campaign. One, and that's part of why I think that they're involved with the PRO Act campaign. And then two, I want to talk maybe a little bit about the Green New Deal and how that can be potentially sold almost like primarily as a jobs program, because I think that's but we can get into that in a minute. So I guess talk about the Green New Deal committee, what's been sort of the connections there.
Yeah, of course. I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. It's yes, the PRO Act is we consider it like a necessary.
I'm very doomed.
I'll be quite frank. I'm not an expert on science. But I trust what more knowledgeable people tell me. And so it is hard to not fall into that.
Do they still talk about people's humors in science? Is that still science?
So I don't want it to seem like if we don't pass the PRO Act, the possibility of winning these other transformative reforms are foreclosed upon. I don't know if that's true, but I also don't know that it is true, right? So, anyways, so this campaign is being led by some of us on the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission, and then the other half of our team is from the Green New Deal Campaign Committee. So they very talented organizers who come to this campaign with an analysis that, like, as labor organizers, we're not always fully aware of. And I will admit also that I'm not well versed in the Green New Deal. I know it's sort of like a body of different policies that have to do with eventually having a green economy here. So some of that would look like transitioning away from fossil fuels, and and creating new jobs in non-extractive industries, whether that be in renewable energies or in the care industry, right? Because we know we have an aging population that's going to need caring for. They're going to need people to care for them, and it's that is a green job. It helps us care for our people in the country. It doesn't extract resources. It doesn't pollute the earth, and it's a necessary part of what we need to do in our society going forward. So this campaign, like I was mentioning earlier, is tied to a jobs guarantee, right? And that jobs guarantee is tied to the creation of jobs in these non-extractive industries, because currently, while we have, I think the unemployment rate is it's very deceiving, right? To think that, low unemployment, things are going great. But it doesn't speak to the reality of the work, what workers experience. A lot of us are finding ourselves in jobs that are in precarious circumstances, precarious situation, where we see a lot of this in the gig economy. One of the most stark examples, after Prop 22 passed here in California, which basically relegated a lot of these like gig type of work jobs to independent contractor status, which basically it makes it extremely difficult for them to ever unionize. But something we saw here locally was Vons, which is a retail grocery chain here in Southern California, and another one, I can't remember the name, but they laid off their delivery drivers because, as we know, in the pandemic, a lot of people needed their groceries delivered. So they laid off their workforce that was, their deliverers, and hired gig workers because they know they can pay them less. They're not their employees, so they never have to worry about them unionizing or.
I remember hearing this story. Like, it was almost like immediate. Like, they basically were like, "Oh yeah, if this happens, if Prop 22 passes, nothing's gonna happen. Y'all are gonna be fine, whatever." And then immediately they just fire everybody and just start contracting with like, not DoorDash. What's the one where they go in the stores and do the shopping?
Yeah. Like I'm completely blanking
so many apps and leads and all these things. I can't remember.
Yeah. So that's what a lot of workers find themselves in these situations. I myself, I've done Lyft driving before. That was when I was in college. And I had a full-time job that paid a decent wage for Los Angeles. It wasn't great. It didn't allow me to live in comfort. I still was renting a room and all that. But in order to supplement my income, I started doing Lyft. And it's a job, right? You're not an independent contractor. You don't have any freedom by any means. So people really need to stop believing that propaganda. Like, you are beholden to Lyft or Uber or whoever, and they are your employer. Like, I think a lot of more, smarter people than me have really been able to elaborate that Lyft and Uber and all these companies are really just mystifying what they do, right? Through their app. Like, they're not doing something innovative or new. Like, you're just further alienating do and putting the burden on them. That's all that, like, the sort of like the cost of maintaining your car. If you get into an accident while you're out, any number of things, like the burden is shifted over to the driver. So it's really something that I think we're going to be seeing more of. I mean, we already are. I know in the initial days of the PRO Act campaign, we saw a flurry of I'm saying this in quotes, independent contractors coming out against the PRO Act because they.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. You've seen the tweets, Jeff.
The freelancers are at it again.
Just like completely unhinged, completely fabricated lies about the PRO Act that they claimed would change their employment status. And it just really speaks to like their lack of understanding of the PRO Act, because the PRO Act does not affect like employee relationship, like what the employee's relationship is to their employer. It just amends the National Labor Relations Act, which has the purview of that is labor organizing, union organizing. So, anyways, to circle back, yeah, we're it's just a trend I think we're going to continue to see with this push to independent contractor status. That all it does is shift the burden away from the company, from the employer onto the employee. And again, just to bring it back full circle, is why we, as socialists, as part of this campaign, we have a long-term vision of a federal jobs guarantee, right? A jobs guarantee that would give everyone a decent standard of living, right? Not just a baseline of $15 an hour minimum wage is a necessary fight that we need to have. I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on that, but even I think most people recognize that $15 an hour is still barely livable, if it is livable. Like in Los Angeles, it would not. Like $15 an hour, you just cannot survive on $15 an hour anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, I don't want to like relive the like first couple of weeks of the Biden administration and all the like drama surrounding their failure or unwillingness to fight around the $15 an hour thing. But I'm still pretty ticked off about that one. Slay Queen, woo, Kirsten Sinema with the big old like thumbs down while trying to get Mitch McConnell's attention. Hey, Mitch, check it out. Oh my God, it was so pathetic.
Yeah, no, it's
more form of life on this earth than a U.S. senator.
Yeah. What are things like in your union currently, Jeff?
So as of right now, I'm a teacher, right? So real quick before I get to that, I need to do station ID one more time. You listen to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. We have Daniel Dominguez, who's a union organizer and a member of the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission of DSA, Democratic Socialist America. So you just asked me what things are like in my union. I tell you what, we have been back in school because I'm a teacher. For folks who might not listen or might be the first time listening, I'm a teacher. And we have been back in school, like literally in person in school since September. Like for the most part, there were like these programs where, some of the kids would be virtual and, some of them would be in person. And essentially the teachers would have to teach both at the same time. And this is something that like I've been on leave myself for the past since September because I have family members that really can't. They have immune problems and asthma, and so they can't get COVID, like very close family members that I would, see every day. But I've been definitely keeping in touch and been sort of a part of the, organizing process with a lot of that stuff. We have a group right now largely it's based in my district, Jefferson Parish, called Louisiana Educators United, where we do, a little bit of like grassroots type organizing through. It's kind of a little bit of a rank and file strategy ish, but like it's not people coming in and getting jobs in that sector. It's people that are already doing those jobs organizing with one another. So it's like not exactly the same, or at least it's not exactly the same with that sort of description of it. But yeah, it's sort of like that. We actually just recently. Some of our members announced that they're going to be running for the leadership of my union now as well, which is really interesting.
That's great. What is that campaign looking like? What's it shaping up like? Do people think there's a real shot at winning here?
I mean, I think that there's a real chance at winning. There's a certain so whether when my sort of orientation towards this has been like win, lose, or draw, organizing needs to happen in this union. And, there's a sense that people are not getting sort of the, they don't have spaces to sort of plug into the work that the union currently has. So what my, the brothers and sisters with LU are doing is essentially create that space and find ways to get members more organized, sort of in a more general sense. In terms of possibility of winning, if the organizing happens correctly, they could win. If not, if the or even if it does and they don't win, you can have a large base of organized members that can push forward, after. So I'm sort of like looking at all sides of the situation, but the Jefferson Parish School Board has been dreadful. Our superintendent has been just absolutely terrible. Just there's a lot of like from administration, this like everything's fine. We only have like 0.02% of like students or teachers in quarantine. Like they're just coming up with these ridiculously small, like seemingly negligible numbers to like underplay the absolute nightmare that a lot of educators and a lot of kids and a lot of their families have been going through this year. A lot of toxic positivity.
Yeah.
It's a term that I hate, but it's there.
Yeah, I think we've reached the point where it's almost inevitable that teachers are going to be returning to the classroom. I know you've been in the classroom since September, but over here in California, it's been at least in Los Angeles County, this district, teachers have not been asked to return until now recently. And UTLA, one of the strongest teacher unions in the country, one of the most militant unions in the country. I think they put up a fight as long as they could, but they signed an agreement to go back to school with the safety measures that they asked for, that they demanded. So that's good, but overall it does seem like there's just not the support there to keep kids out of school, right? And what I mean by keep kids out of school, right, just learning from home. Like, yes, distance learning is not ideal, but people are not vaccinated at the rates that we need to be vaccinating them. Like my girlfriend is going back to teach in East Los Angeles, or the eastern part of the city, where it's a heavily Latino district or neighborhoods, and we know that vaccination rates are not what they need to be, and infection rates are still high over there. So it's frustrating to have to deal with sort of the misinformation coming from people who are pushing back on, or who are pushing teachers to get back into the classroom. So it's I just hope we don't see like a wave of more teacher deaths, because I recently heard just like there's been hundreds of teachers since the pandemic. It's just an unbelievable number. It's like,
it's really wild, because like I don't even know necessarily that like there is this popular groundswell of people who are just like, we must get our kids to go back to these dangerous schools that have poor ventilation, and while COVID's happening or whatever. But there's this like and this is my sort of like big brain like grand strategy of like what they're doing is essentially like, when schools are like officially like, when you can't go to the building, they're that kind of closed, you're sending a very, very clear signal that things are not normal in the society, and you need to behave as though things are not normal. But if you can send the kids to school and try to get them out of your hair for a couple of hours or whatever, and that's sort of like probably an oversimplification or whatever, but like if you can at least say, well, the kids are at school, things are at least kind of normal, when we need to be kind of constantly keeping in the forefront of our mind that we cannot accept that the reality of COVID right now is a normal thing or a desirable thing. We need to like maintain vigilance. I don't know. I think about that a lot, and almost like the people freak out about masks and stuff like that too, and like the mask wearing is like one of the reasons I think there's such a push against them, and it sort of like goes into these conspiracies, is that is a visual symbol that things are not normal right now in the world, and if it's gone, people can just sort of pretend that it's better, and that you don't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, I think we just said that resonated with me, because I've been thinking about the past few days. It's like, what is behind the push to get kids back into school, into physical learning? And it can't be that these people really care about their education, because I don't see them getting a great education just because they're in physical proximity to each other. There's going to be like plexiglass around them. They're probably going to have to deal with their classmates getting sick, and we may even see deaths, a wave of deaths as a result of this move to go back to school. But I think I think what you said, it's true that people want a return to normalcy. They don't want to have to look around and accept that things are not normal, that people are dying, preventable deaths, and because it's not like school, at least for in my analysis, schools are not a profit making operation. So why do we want right now? Right. Like, so it's like, why do we want kids back in school? And I think that's it, right? I think you hit the nail on the head. It's people want to feel normal again.
It's all a part of, well, and it's a push coming from like the ruling class to essentially like if the schools are open, then the workers have babysitters for their kids, so then they can then return to work, and that's sort of like the progression that I see as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was like, kind of like the freelancer thing against the PRO Act. It was, to me, and at least in my estimation, it was total astroturf campaign. Like you said, there's no real groundswell from parents, and usually what we see is like the more middle class, upper middle class sector of our population who are parents who are pushing for it. It's not
all races, by the way, too.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not something that goes across. I mean, I guess there are more white parents, I suppose, are like okay with sending their kids back to their like schools and their gated communities, or kids that parents that don't even have in private schools. But I mean, they will essentially the ruling class will often highlight multiple different sort of like background and ethnicity people to sort of see because one of the things that happens a lot is they'll say that these you wanted to deny these kids and black kids in poor communities their schooling, and when you actually ask the parents, most of the parents or whatever, what they think about going back to school, they're against it. But if they can find a couple of them, they'll make sure that they get the ones that get the speaking time and the camera time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, they're pretty good. They know sort of how to run these astroturf campaigns, and you got to find a diverse crowd of people who are willing to spout your message.
And it's really, I mean, that's just so unbelievably like it's vicious, it's really sad, but what you gonna do? These are our class enemies. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Comrade. You're welcome to join us anytime. We are on WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. Can you give people more information where they can just find out about the PRO Act for DSA and some more stuff about how they can plug in?
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned earlier, this is this cannot be a strictly DSA campaign, although I encourage people to check out DSA for our campaign, and you can do so by going to dsausa.org/proact. And there you'll find a few different links on how to get involved, whether it's doing phone banks, whether it's organizing within your union, organizing your coworkers in any place you work, really. So again, people, we need as many people out in the streets, out organizing for it, talking to coworkers, talking to neighbors about what the PRO Act is. And I think DSA is doing a phenomenal job of demystifying the PRO Act, because ultimately it's a piece of legislation, and we want to be able to talk about it fluently with our coworkers in a way that resonates with what they're going through, what they want to see in a fighting labor movement. So DSA is doing a tremendous job at that. But we won't win this without a mass mobilization. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, brother. I really do appreciate it. And we're gonna pass this thing. All right, folks. You can listen to Good Morning Comrade on. Did you want to say something on the way out? Oh, okay. You can listen to Good Morning Comrade on WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. You can also get more information about our show, goodmorningcomrade.com. You can also watch me live every day from 8 Central till 9 Central on Good Morning Comrade live on our YouTube channel, youtube.com. Just search Good Morning Comrade. Thanks again, brother. Bye, everybody.
Take care.